Hi, and welcome to the Spawdcast. My name is Carrie Hyde, and I'm your host. And sitting to the left of me is John Lozay. John is our guest co-host. As you know, this season we bring on a different guest co-host every single episode. And he's actually a friend of mine. I got to know him through my husband, who went to high school with him. So John's been a big part of my life for many years. My husband and I have been married for 25 years. He is one of the smartest, most intuitive people that I know, naturally. And that's why I thought he would be such a great co-host, because he is not just intuitive with people, but he loves animals. So he's going to help me interview someone that I am so very, very, very excited to bring to you guys today, because she's going to shed some light on a subject that if you're in the pet industry, you know is becoming a problem. So I want to introduce to you today, and thank you so much for being here. This is Josie Beug, doctor. She's a veterinarian. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, this is just a topic. So for our listeners, most of the time when I call veterinarians, a lot of times I'll ask if there's something that you're passionate about. I reach out to veterinarians who are like-minded, as well as some that are kind of on the opposite side, because I like to hear the differences. But when I reached out to you, I had said that to you. What do you want to talk about? And one of the things that she said, and I mean, immediately I was like, oh yeah, we need to do it. And what did you say? Let's talk about
the pharmacology opioid crisis in veterinary medicine that's going on with our animals right now.
It's horrible.
That sucks.
It's horrible
so
to think.
Sorry, it's so wrong.
It's so wrong to think that we have animals addicted to opioids and all sorts of medications, right?
Yeah, because the animals don't have a choice in the matter. The animals depend upon all of us to be their advocates and to try to figure out how to best help them. So they don't have a voice into how these drugs make them feel, whether they make them feel better, whether they make them feel worse. And at the same time, the vets are prescribing them based upon information from the big pharmaceutical companies, and the owners are asked to give them to their animals. But the animals sitting there receiving them, and we have, no feedback. So, it's distressing.
It is.
I've walked in on more than a few cases. It's kind of escalated in the past year or two, and now I'm seeing multiple drugs used, which there is a form of pain relief called multimodal pain relief. But when you start piling drug after drug on top of each other, I've actually seen overdoses.
Oh my gosh.
I'm seeing dogs die from the effects of the drugs, not from the effects of their disease process.
Isn't it? I mean, it's crazy for the average pet parent to think that their pets could overdose on drugs. I mean, we hear it all the time with people, but to think that, how did your dog die? Oh, he had a drug overdose. I mean, people might giggle at that sometimes and think, because it seems so out of our realm of what we understand. But before we dive into it too much, tell me a little bit about what made you want to be a veterinarian.
Oh boy, it kind of goes back when I was 3 years old.
3?
I have a brother who's 19 years older than me, and he was a veterinarian, and I wanted to be a veterinarian like my oldest brother. But that was way back when, in the 1970s. And my father, I come from a cattle ranching family. My father was like, oh, girls can't be vets. They can't go out there and handle cows and horses. So I parked it. I put it in the back of my consciousness. And instead, I was like, well, I'll be a pediatrician. I want to go into medicine. That didn't last very long. I ended up dropping out of college after my first year and going back and really thinking, what do I really want to do? And I came back to veterinary medicine. Wow. But it was after I realized that there were people out there, there were veterinarians out there practicing what we called alternative medicine, or like acupuncture and herbal medicine and massage and these types of modalities. That's when I decided to go back into veterinary medicine. But I had to go through conventional veterinary school in order to get there. So I applied for veterinary school with the idea that I was going to go on to practice alternative veterinary medicine.
So I know we talked briefly about that being such a struggle for you to get through the conventional veterinary medicine to get your license, right? What were some of those?
What was the struggle?
I actually co-designed, I went through, in veterinary school, I started a club that was associated with the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association. And I invited speakers into the vet school to teach me about homeopathy and herbal medicine and chiropractic and acupuncture. And I invited the whole rest of the school to take part if they wanted. So I kind of co-designed my own alternate track while I was in vet school.
You had to do that? It wasn't available.
It was not available.
Oh my gosh.
I did it. I went to these conferences and brought people into the vet school. I actually held our own conference at the University of Wisconsin. Now there's an acupuncturist on staff, but back then everybody thought I was a crazy person.
What did the school?
But I also graduated third in my class. I had to keep my grades up there and toe the line as much as possible, so they had no excuse to try to get rid of me. They couldn't.
Right.
You know, I was a really good student.
You were what?
Yeah.
A really good student.
You were a really good student?
Yeah.
Obviously.
But that gave you, you know, when someone's kind of looking at you. I know my husband was trying to get into the fire department for a while, and he was successful in it, but he was older, and so he had to, same as you, he had so much more he had to prove, so they couldn't say, oh, he's old and he can't climb the ladder, kind of thing.
Which
so
is not the case.
he had to climb the ladder faster, quicker, harder, you know, to get there. But what a motivating factor for you to know that when you get out of veterinary school, you were going to be able to teach your clients this different modalities that you do. So that's just so amazing.
Well, what did the school think of all of it? I mean, were you...
The very first semester, I was called into the dean's office with the other upperclassmen who had helped me start this alternative holistic veterinary medicine club. Right. And we had a long talk with the dean because we wanted to discuss research in animals and the ethics of that. And they didn't do that anyway?
It's I think you're talking about how they were using animals for research, correct?
Yeah, how they were using animals for research. And we were trying to do it in a balanced manner. Okay. But then there were a few times when, in my nutrition class, our small animal nutrition class, and you'll appreciate this, it was taught, the professor for the class was actually the representative for Hill's Science Diet prescription dog food. And so in our lab, I walked in, of course, this was already third year, and I was making my own homemade raw food at home. And I walked into the class and I held up my hand and started asking them some questions about the 4D animals, the quality of the protein. Like, how can you say Oreo cookies sitting over there as an example of your protein source or carbs are good quality? Why do you use dead, diseased, dying animals in your dog food? And you know, smoke started coming out of his ears and his eyes got really red.
It's not funny,
and
but
I
it's
just
funny.
said, okay, I've said my piece and now I'll be quiet before I'm kicked out of class.
Oh my gosh.
I can't graduate because I flunked nutrition, you know. So.
I flunked nutrition, which really wasn't nutrition as we know. And as we're trying to teach our listeners is what nutrition is and what is taught in vet school are two totally very different things. And that's part of the beginning of, I think that is a very good beginning segue into why our animals are seemingly needing these medications for pain and discomfort, right? It starts with nutrition.
Exactly.
Right?
It does start with nutrition.
It starts with nutrition. Yeah.
Why do they do that? It seems like a simple question, but why, if they know that, let them teach it to their students?
If they know what? They're
Oreo cookies sitting on the counter, or that's...
They're teaching because the pet food industry, it actually started back in the Depression when people could not afford to feed their animals. And this is where Hill's Science Diet started. So these two guys went out and they were like, these animals are starving in the street. Nobody can afford to feed their dog and cat. So they went around to all these factories and found the fish heads laying on the floor and all of this essentially industry waste from food processing industry. And they're like, there's got to be a way to turn this waste into dog food short term so we can get these animals through the depression and through the war, and then people can start feeding them, be able to feed them good food again. Well, they realized they could make money off of using all of these waste products. It goes back to money, honestly.
It
just goes back to money.
It
And
does.
the pet food industry, you would know this probably better than me. It's a billions of dollars industry. It's probably up to $10 billion almost right now.
It is. Yeah.
So when you're talking about $10 billion a year, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they don't want, and they have a really good formula of taking waste products that are not fit for human consumption, and turning it into a dog food that they can charge premium prices for by calling it prescription, et cetera.
And what better marketing?
So as long as there's a profit, it doesn't matter what's in it.
Correct. But what better marketing than to market it?
They're thinking, right.
So they market it to veterinarians in vet school. And then, I mean, who isn't going to listen to that?
They gave us the very first day of vet school, they were handing out free bags of dog food that we could take home to feed our dogs and cats.
Absolutely.
And that's where it started.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's how, and it's just this cycle that goes on, and which leads us to the drug problem, because we're feeding poor diets. And so what do you in your practice, what do you see a lot of pets coming in with? What kind of inflammatory diseases that you could link back to food that would cause them to get on pain pens?
Actually in probably the past 5 years, I'm seeing systemic inflammatory diseases. I've seen dogs that are coming to me that are eating kibble most of their lives. They're coming to me with pancreatitis. All the itises are all inflammation.
It's huge.
Pancreatitis, carditis, inflammation of the heart, enteritis, gastroenteritis, arthritis.
Oh my
all
gosh.
of these are all inflammatory conditions.
Right.
And we're based off of a kibble food that is highly processed under high heat, that denatures all of the proteins in there and denatures all of the nutrients. And then when you look at a bag of kibble, on the end there's this big long list of vitamins and minerals. They have to add in all the vitamins and minerals in a powdered form because it's all cooked out of the food.
Right.
So the food is completely dead. There's no live enzymes in there. There's no food particles that a body can really recognize.
Right.
So it starts setting up this inflammation everywhere in the body.
Well, so then it's their version of living on fast food, kind of?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Like McDonald's hamburgers that isn't really hamburger. It's like that pink,
Pink. I thought it was brown.
The pink goo that they have.
Like
that was gross. What about, I'm curious, I have been seeing a lot of dogs with dementia, like where they just kind of do very similar acts that humans do. And I have been telling my clients, the inflammation in the body, have you been seeing, I mean, obviously pancreatitis, I see that constantly. Yeah. But dementia, I'm seeing a lot of.
Pancreatitis, we never used to see.
Never.
And it's like it's on a, it's all over the place. Dementia is just inflammation of the blood vessels in the brain. But there's also what happened back in the 90s that really changed all of our food source was the use of glyphosate and the genetically modified organisms. So probably every single one of us, if we went and got our blood and urine tested right now, we would show up positive for glyphosate, which is Roundup.
Sure.
And what that does is it chelates all of the good minerals out of our body. So we're all mineral deficient. This goes for our animals as well. And it kills all of the good microorganisms in our body. So that's why there's been this big push on taking probiotics and having to replace all the good microorganisms.
Right.
Because it's killed off by the glyphosate. So that's a whole nother issue that's creating major health problems. Not to mention the fact that there was a farmer in California who won the lawsuit on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma being caused by his exposure to Roundup.
My dad died of.
Yeah. But we're still not doing anything about it. And I still hear people say, "Oh, that's not true." I'm like, "Okay, well, we actually went through a lawsuit."
Go ahead, eat it, take it.
Right?
All I can say is everybody has
Good
to
luck.
make their choice. They're still advertising it on television, and people eat up the advertising. We're living in a world right now also, but where there is so much. You have to be very discerning and educate yourself. I mean, I was taught when I was in advanced placement biology in high school, I was taught how to go to the medical stacks and the primary research journals and look at primary research articles to find my information.
Right.
And that's what I've had to do on some of these drugs that have come out. I actually wrote an article. I've started seeing animals come to me on certain drugs that were never used before, and yet they will call me as a last resort. So their animal will have arthritis, and they'll say, they're not walking. I'm afraid I'm going to have to put them to sleep. Can you please come see them? I do house calls. And I go there, and what are they on? They're usually on tramadol, which is an opioid, and gabapentin, which is, now they know it's a calcium channel blocker. It has nothing to do with GABA, the neurotransmitter. So I started seeing all these dogs, they were on these heavy duty drugs, and yet they were walking less, they were moving less, and their owners were having to consider euthanasia. So I actually went and looked up gabapentin. I finally got so fed up after about seeing 100 dogs and it not doing anything. I'm like, what is up with this drug?
Yeah, it's all over the place. All of a sudden.
Okay. Well, I have an article that's all on the internet. If you Google gabapentin, it comes up about 5 or 6 down. Pfizer put out gabapentin. It was initially for a very specific seizure issue in humans. Well, they wanted to make more money off of it. They're like, well, it costs so much money to develop drugs. We need to make money selling it. So they went out there and told their salespeople to have doctors prescribe it for neuropathic pain in people. And it was an off-label use. Well, what they found is people started becoming addicted to it. It developed this rage syndrome. It increased suicide rates. It was doing some really horrible things. So a class action lawsuit was filed against Pfizer for gabapentin. And there was a $46 million settlement on that drug.
Huh.
Now, the year that settlement came out, this is what I found just going back and doing my research, was the year that I started seeing op-ed pieces, and I call them op-ed because they're not scientific journal articles, in the veterinary trade journals. They're not primary research journals about gabapentin.
Wow.
So it's like they took it from the human
and passed it down into our animals.
And passed it right over to veterinary medicine. Because guess what? Our dogs can't complain about how it makes them feel.
Right, exactly. So they just keep,
also, I mean, and when you look into gabapentin, for the first maybe 6-7 years or so it was on the market, they didn't even know the physiological mechanism of action, what it did in the body. They just found that out a few years ago where it checks calcium. It affects calcium channels in the body, which also affects heart. We have calcium channels all throughout. They're trying to find the link between calcium channels and pain, but they're having to do somersaults and twisting around trying to make that link. There is no double-blind placebo-controlled studies that indicate that gabapentin relieves pain in dogs and cats.
Wow. There's no study.
There's no study. All the studies that are out there, the double-blind studies, have all equivocal results.
Wow.
They're like, well, it may have, it may not have.
When someone now takes their animal to the vet and they said, we're going to prescribe this for them, they need this, are they told it's an opioid? Because there's so much information now that you'd think they'd say, maybe not, unless they both take it.
Gabapentin isn't an opioid. Tramadol is an opioid. But no, most veterinarians are not educating their clients. No. What I'm getting recently, and this is 2 cases in just a past week, people called me up, their animal was on gabapentin. The first thing I do, I say, take the pills, flush those down the toilet, and we'll make an appointment and I'll come see your dog. Well, but I don't want my dog to be in pain. And I said, what do you mean you don't want your dog to be in pain? Well, the vet said if I don't give gabapentin, my dog will be in pain.
Oh,
From
my gosh.
what?
So the vets are actually using guilt as a factor to get the people to give the medication to their animals.
And what are they in pain from? Are they telling them what they're in pain from, or just generic pain?
What we're seeing a lot for pain is arthritis, those kind of things. Yeah, some of them probably aren't in pain.
Right.
Some of them don't have a definitive diagnosis. Right. Some of them do have a definitive diagnosis. But what I find when I see animals on that drug is they are sedated, they're out of it. I've seen some of them actually head pressing into corners and showing signs of dementia. Wow. You brought up dementia.
I'm seeing so much of it.
When I take them off that drug, I had a standard poodle. I took him off the drug. And a week later, all of a sudden, the dog's personality is back, and he got up off his bed and walked over to his toy chest and pulled out a toy for the first time in like 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
Damn.
Yeah.
I'm going to start finding out if my clients, these dementia dogs, are on gabapentin. I'm going to find out. So, because I'm curious about it.
That's a good question to ask. There was a study done by a group out of Stanford, and I can't remember the researcher's name. He's no longer alive, but he was involved in neuroplasticity research in terms of how the brain can reform neuronal connections and repair itself. And he found that gabapentin actually inhibited an enzyme that would prevent the brain from being able to repair itself.
Oh my gosh.
And when I found that, that's what just clicked for me. And I'm like, it's not a good thing.
No, you can't repair yourself. How are you going to get better?
It is amazing to me to think that any life form's, biological life form's body fixes itself. You cut your hand, it fixes itself. It's amazing.
Wow.
So to kind of stop that in an animal or that can't talk for itself or anybody is, wrong's not even the right word.
Oh my gosh, it's so wrong. But you're right. We need a stronger word than wrong. So I have a question. So I pretty much think this is what's happening a lot of times. So when I buy drugs from, I don't buy drugs, but if my doctor had prescribed drugs to me, right, I go to Walgreens maybe, and that's where I pick up my prescription. But in veterinary medicine, that's not what happens, right? So a veterinarian can actually profit off of the sale of tramadol. Is that?
They can, but honestly, what's happening on the veterinarian end is veterinarians are super busy. Veterinarians are trying to meet their overhead. Now, there's a whole nother thing that has happened with veterinary medicine in the past 6-7 years is corporations have come in and bought up the mom and pop veterinary clinic.
Yep.
So now we not only have the veterinarian is working as an employee, the corporation may own 100 clinics, they may own 10,000 clinics.
Yep.
Now, if you own 10,000 clinics and you need to buy a certain amount of drugs, you sit down with the big pharma reps, and I saw it back at the North American Veterinary Conference. I noticed a huge shift. I saw it happening. There were, lots of men in black suits sitting in hotel lobbies signing contracts and making deals. And I had never seen that before in veterinary medicine. But anyways, so this owner of a $10,000 clinics, well, if you buy so many doses of gabapentin, you're going to get this big of a deal. So the pharmaceutical company makes a big chunk of change. The veterinary clinic gets it at a lower price so they can make more of a profit off of it.
Right.
But nowadays, that money isn't going to the individual veterinarian's pocket. But what's happening to the individual veterinarian is they are now caught between their boss, who says the clinic they work for, they walk over and open up the pharmacy, and this is what they have available to prescribe.
And that's it. It's what drug they get the best markup on.
That they get the best deal from the pharmaceutical company. And then these young vets, I have to tell you, so they are between a rock and a hard place.
Sure.
And veterinary medicine is becoming the highest risk for suicide of any profession out there right now.
Shut up.
It is. Yes. I know just in my area alone, 5 mom and pop type veterinarian hospitals have just sold out to Banfield. And I've watched these vets, some of them say, I'm done, and they walk out and they leave. We lost a really good vet recently because he didn't want to be under that. And my clients are asking me, why did he leave? And I said he probably didn't want to be told how to practice medicine. He didn't want to be told, and he didn't want to be told that he had to sell so much advantage and so much, because they get called into the office and you're not keeping track with what I want you to do. And that's five.
Well, they're working on commission a lot of times as well.
Sure.
And then you have, and what they've done, they're modeling veterinary medicine off of human medicine, which we know is a big broken system.
Right.
So you also have the insurance companies coming into play. There are now, I don't know how many veterinary insurance companies on the market.
Oh, it's out of control.
So they're taking their piece of the profit. And the average general practitioner coming out of veterinary school, and this is something I sat down with somebody who graduated around the same time I did, and we had dinner together the other night, and I was like, what is going on with all the general practitioners?
Sad.
And he's like, Josie, they're being taught how to refer to specialists, and they aren't being taught what we were taught in veterinary school, and they're also being taught how to, looking at a case, how to develop a case in terms of the insurance codes.
Oh my God.
Versus the SOAP protocol, where we would come up with differentials and things like that. And then we would come up with different treatment plans. Nowadays, you say if they have this disease, and this is the treatment. There are no options out there.
There's no get a second opinion.
There's no critical thinking anymore.
There's no critical thinking.
Zero.
Exactly.
There's every case is treated exactly the same way. And
it's based on the algorithm, just like the algorithm of Facebook and Instagram, and how the algorithms are taking over our world. The algorithm's taking over veterinary medicine.
Oh my gosh, corporations and algorithms are deciding how to control your pet's health and how to manage their pain if they have it. And we can circle right back around to, if your pet's in pain, there's a good chance you can do it through nutrition, you can do it through herbalism, you can do it through chiropractic, right? We have all these other modalities.
Exercise, acupuncture, massage, I'd use Chinese herbs, I use Western herbs, and the animals, and nutrition alone as well. I mean, the animals literally can come back to life.
Oh my gosh. I had a veterinarian in my area prescribe, I think we talked about it, I might have told you, she prescribed 2 months of tramadol for a scratch on the dog's lip. I'm not minimizing it. It was a scratch on the dog's lip. There was no broken bones. There was nothing, and it was 2 months. 2 months of tramadol. Yeah, wow. And now like the drug use that's being used in veterinary medicine is becoming so wide known that this actually just happened to me about a year ago. I was in a veterinarian office, and I was just sitting there waiting with a client's dog, and in walks a woman up to the counter, and she says, I'm here to pick up my dog's tramadol. And the girl behind the counter was smart and said, well, we don't have an order. And she says, well, I'm the dog walker, and the dog walker, the owner, told me to come pick up the tramadol. What it all came down to is this girl was a drug addict, and she was trying to get the dog's tramadol. And the dog didn't, but I'm thinking, this dog walker now now the dogs are getting extra prescription. This is the new way to get drugs, is get it from your vet. Take your dog's drugs.
Take your dog's drugs.
So we've got this huge problem, and what do we do to solve it? It's just kind of frustrating.
The veterinarian with the scrape on that for 10 weeks that's just wrong. I'm not a veterinarian, but that looks screwed up. That's just not right. I'm smart enough to figure that out.
We need you to just go up in front of the AVMA
and
go,
just like, what the?
I'm sorry, this is just wrong.
I mean, someone's got to, this is wrong. Are you just dumb as a kite? Kites,
Well, yeah, it comes back to common sense.
Yeah.
And so you're forfeiting your common sense for a profit, I guess. And everyone deserves to make a profit of somewhere. But how many lives are... When do lives get important enough to stop it?
When do we? I just had a guy tell me the other day. He says, "You should really start selling kibble, Carrie. There's a lot of profit on it." And I said to him, my response was,
"Sorry."
I simply said, "There's a lot of profit off of crack, also." But I'm not I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. It's not going to be what I'm going to do. So, but you're right. Everybody needs to live and make money, but I think we have to, pull up our boots and do it ethically, and that's not what's happening.
It's probably a tacky question, but is there an association, a effed up opioid owner just passes it right along to the animal? and with not a second thought?
Oh, I'm sure. Well, no, because I would imagine a human drug addict wouldn't share.
Well, not necessarily. No, not share, but think like, well, I'm okay. That dog, like it's because anyone in a relative non-effed up brain or would think that dog's effed up. It's not right. My dog
Well,
never
that
stood
was
in the
gonna
corner
lead
and
me-
banged his head against the wall.
But here's the thing, the owners are in a tough place too, because they see their dog, they take their dog isn't acting right. You take your dog into your veterinarian and the veterinarian says your dog's in pain.
Yep.
That is, so many people are terrified of their animals being in pain. I do a lot of end-of-life care, a lot of hospice care, and the biggest thing I get from an animal owner is I just don't want them to be in pain.
Are people intimidated by their veterinarians?
Yes.
Like, I won't question anything you do or say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the vet saying, well, your dog's in pain and they need to take this pain medication. Take the gabapentin and tramadol and everything's going to be okay.
Yep.
They get home, they start giving it, and all it does is knocks the dog out and doesn't really improve anything. But then they start feeling guilty, like, well, maybe it's their fault. Maybe they aren't giving the medication properly. Maybe if their dog isn't improving and they take it back, the vet's going to tell them it's time to put the dog to sleep. And that's another thing I'm getting is a lot of people are coming to me going, the vet said there's nothing else that can be done and I need to put him to sleep.
I just had a call this morning.
Heartbroken that, it crushes somebody
Yes.
to think, this is the time to put their dog to sleep.
Yeah.
But so that's what upsets me. So it's putting the owner in this really precarious place. So then they're afraid to take their dog back into their regular vet. And I'll have people call me at this point and I'm saying, listen, there's other pain control besides tramadol and gabapentin.
But
there's drugs like the anti-inflammatories. Now, Rimadyll's one. Some of these drugs have gotten a really bad rap. But if you have an inflamed bulging disc, if I put that dog on a week of prednisone, that pain's going to be gone. The disc inflammation's going to sink down. And then I can take it off the pred and follow up with acupuncture and herbs. And we can get that dog walking again and feeling good on no drugs.
Wow.
But veterinarians have lost that finesse of understanding how the drugs work and integrating them with other
lost
methods.
the finesse also, but what about, it's like a mother's like an angry bear for their child or their pet is walk right back in and say, what the fuck did you do to my dog? Because I'm sure it's worse now than it was when it went in there. And so screw the vet and say, get a second opinion, or I want to talk to, show me why this is going to work or why it's better than, because maybe the veterinarians have a God complex and think, too bad, you just do what I say.
Some of them do. Some of them do have a God complex.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They do. And they don't want to, a lot of veterinarians don't want to have to deal with that difficult owner that asks too many questions.
Yeah.
But you made me difficult by pushing me into the corner of just here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, ask about the drug. How is this how is this relieving my dog's pain? Do you have any double-blind placebo-controlled studies? That's the magic word in science. And that's what I got slammed with all the time on herbs and acupuncture. Where's the double-blind placebo-controlled studies?
So let's just flip it on them. Where are they? So
where are they?
They just don't want any questions is what it comes down to. Don't ask a question.
Well, yeah,
just do what I say, just do what I tell you to
Well,
do.
and now, I don't know how it is out there with you guys, but down here now, veterinarians, you pull up in the parking lot and people are having to pass their dogs out the window. And they're not even going in to see the vet.
Yep.
The animal goes in, they do what diagnostics they are, they treat it, and they send it back out, and the vet gets on the phone or a text message and tells them what to do and what to get.
It's interesting you bring that up
poor
because
animals, Jesus Christ.
that is still going on here in California, and I am a supporter of us being cautious and stuff, but I almost feel like the vets are still doing that because they like it better that way.
They do.
Because I'm like,
They're hiding behind it.
I
because
think
they
there's
don't
some
have to-
precautions you can take that don't include me sitting in my car and not being able to see what you're doing. So I feel like that needs to adjust. But to kind of guide us a little bit on this for our listeners, do dogs, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but for our listeners, do they experience the same kind of addiction to drugs, right? So if you're giving a dog tramadol for 6 months, can you just cold turkey them off? Or do you need to wean them off?
You can, but with opioids, the addiction is a physiological addiction. So whenever you give the body an external source of a compound that the body makes, So like with opioids, our bodies make endorphins. And it's actually one of the compounds that acupuncture helps stimulate our brains to release when I do acupuncture. But when you're giving an external source of endorphins, the body says, oh, we don't have to make that anymore, so we can conserve energy. So once you stop, you can stop cold turkey the opioids, but there's going to be a delay until the body starts amping up production again. That's again where things like other sources of pain relief can come in to help that out.
Would you experience, because I'm concerned that some of our listeners might have had their dogs on tramadol for 2 years and they listen to this and they say, I'm done. Would they experience the same kind of a withdrawal that a human might off of, so we wouldn't see them, sweating and like vomiting or having any kind of withdrawal symptoms like a human?
There is a potential they could do that. I mean, we might see it more as a healing crisis, but there is the potential it can do that. The scariest thing are like benzodiazepines and some of the other drugs, which is Valium and Xanax, will actually you can have seizures upon withdrawal. Okay. And you could potentially see that in dogs. So what I'll usually do, if they've been on it a short term, I tell them to just stop. If they've been on it long term, I add in a whole bunch of other resources for the body to help gear it up and get it functioning. And then I gradually reduce the dose. Okay. And I'm going into the homes, so I'm seeing the animals, how they're reacting at home, not when they're stressed out in a veterinary office. I'm also seeing, I open the cabinet doors and I'm seeing what drugs are in there, how many they've given. It's amazing how many people will actually get prescriptions from their veterinarians and never give them, which I'm actually like, great, you didn't give it. Dog got better on its own. Amazing.
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because I told someone the other day, because she called me up and I said, is your dog, when's the last time your dog was vaccinated? And she says, I know, you're going to lecture me. I'm the worst pet parent ever. I haven't taken her to the vet to get a vaccine in 5 years. And I said, good. She said, what? And I said, it's weird to think that I think that your pet is healthier because he hasn't been going to the vet every 6 months. But I do believe that, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be that way. But she couldn't believe that I said that. And truthfully, when she brought the dog to me, it didn't have any skin problems, no ear infections. The dog was perfectly healthy. And I'm like, interesting, interesting little thing. So I'm gonna so we can keep on track with time and stuff. I just want to kind of recap a little bit. Make sure you guys jump in if there's any last questions. But one of the things that we definitely want to realize is what causes our pets to be in pain that would lead them to a vet hospital to need these drugs or be prescribed these drugs, I should say. So we know that that's going to come from lack of exercise, poor nutrition. We could even get deeper into, I have on other shows if people want to listen to it with Dr. Dodds about over-vaccinating. Over-medicating, our flea and tick medications. Are these the things that are causing your pet to be in pain, right? Being overweight. Mm-hmm. So we know that. So that's the first step, right? If you're listening to this, we want you to do, all three of us, is let's figure out what could be causing it or leading you to that. Right. And then we know that we have to speak up, right? When we go to the vet, we have to say,
just ask questions.
I got to ask questions.
Enough, except for me, maybe.
Because what happens, right, stupidly, is your dog ends up on a tramadol and you think, oh, I'm just going to put him on tramadol, but you didn't address the other problems. Well, then the tramadol stops working. And so we, like you were talking about before, then now we're piling drugs on top of drugs on top of drugs on top of drugs. And all of this is going to lead to what? Liver. Just
liver.
Done.
Exactly.
Right? So you're back. So you're right back already to where you started, and you've spent thousands of dollars trying to help your pet, and now you're just right back to your dog being sick and ill again. So yeah. So we know that dogs can become sort of addicted, you said. We have to worry about that. And what about, and then we know about alternatives. You talked about some alternative things that you can do. So if your dog's overweight, obviously lose weight, but we've got acupuncture available. We've got
chiropractic, we've got massage, and there's things that I try to teach people, things that they can do actually at home. Exercise, get your dog out, even if it's an old dog, make him get up and walk around the house 10 times a day.
Right.
There's lots of good supplements. I mean, I use a Boswellia turmeric supplement that I've seen work as good as Rimadyl for arthritis.
Wow.
I have a whole arsenal of Chinese herbal formulas that can work for different forms of arthritis, nerve pain, disc pain, supplementing magnesium for disc pain and muscle pain.
Wow.
Rehab techniques that people can learn to do at home with their dogs.
Awesome.
So there's a lot out there.
So you do consultations, right?
Yes.
So
I do.
if one of our listeners wants to talk to you, how would they reach you?
They could email me at consultwithdrjosie@gmail.com.
Okay.
I'm booked, but email me and I will try to get back to them. I have a waiting list on my house calls and consults right now.
Isn't that, I did an interview with Dr. Jean Dodds a while back, and she had said that she tries to communicate to people about not over-vaccinating. So she talks to other veterinarians, and they always say to her, oh, I won't have any business. But look at you. Right?
Dr. Jean Dodds was one of my heroes in veterinary medicine. I still have her packet of research she did on ethoxyquin way back in the day.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, I graduated in 1998. When I was in vet school, my immunologist was Dr. Ronald Schultz.
Oh, yeah.
And he teamed up with Jean Dodds, and he was lecturing to us about only vaccinating puppies and kittens.
Yeah. Yeah.
20 years ago.
And we're still not doing it.
And this was in veterinary school. This was in the University of Wisconsin School of Veterinary Medicine in the lecture halls that he was lecturing this. So it's not some weird people out there on the fringes.
No, it's not.
And yet we are still vaccinating every year. And when we have 3-year labeled vaccines, I have a 3-year labeled vaccine for distemper and parvo. I rarely vaccinate. If an animal has cancer or has allergies or anything, I will not put a vaccine in them.
Good for you.
And now, and then we talk about the allergy drugs, Apoquel. The package insert of Apoquel mentions neoplasia 3 different times.
That's crazy.
Neoplasia means cancer.
Wow.
So you're going to give a drug where they're
already
saying, if the dog has cancer, take the dog off the drug immediately.
Oh my God.
That's a little bit too late.
Yeah, well, just like the flea and tick stuff, if he's got seizures, take him off of it. But my point is if there are any conventional veterinarians listening, you're a perfect example of why not giving drugs and over-medicating, you can still have a very viable practice, right? And it comes from your heart.
Yeah.
So when you say you're booked, I'm like,
go to sleep at night.
You don't have to over-vaccinate.
I can go to sleep
Exactly. You don't have to over-vaccinate and over-medicate to have a wonderful practice and help so many animals. So, Dr. Josie, thank you so
nice.
much for enlightening our listeners, our viewers. We can't thank you enough for being here. John, always a pleasure. He gets so passionate, and he comes.
I keep thinking, shut up! Don't interrupt!
He comes over all the time.
Don't interrupt!
He comes to the spa and he'll see me talking to someone at home. Why don't they just?
But thank you very much.
Yes.
Very
So
much.
we can't thank you enough, and our listeners, thank you so much for being here, supporting us. If you aren't subscribed yet, please do. It'll keep us going. It'll keep us able to bring on amazing vets like Dr. Josie so that she can help you better take care of your pets in the future. So thank you again for listening.
Thank you.
And
you.
Oh, you're welcome. So as a passion of mine. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.